Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Minecraft Disney World. Today we're going to be sticking around in the Magic Kingdom and we're going to be taking a look at a classic ride. And by classic, I mean classic. We're going to be taking a look at Peter Pan's Flight, located in Fantasyland. Now, like many other rides in the Magic Kingdom and in Disney World, it's actually based on a ride that opened in Disneyland years earlier. The Disney World version opened in October 3rd, 1971, which actually wasn't opening day of Walt Disney World. It was 2 days later. Walt Disney opened on October 1st. The Disneyland version did open on opening day, which was July 17th, 1955. So they had a couple of decades to sort of work on the ride and really perfect it. There's also a version in Tokyo Disneyland, and there's also a version in Disneyland Paris. And then, like many of the rides over there, some of them are almost direct copies of the version from Disney World. So, the original idea of the ride, when it was envisioned by the Imagineers, was that you were going to fly as Peter Pan, and so you would be flying through the scenes of the movie, like the classic Disney movie, and you would be Peter Pan. The weird thing is, a lot of people who rode the ride at Disneyland didn't grasp that concept, and so a lot of people were asking why you never see Peter Pan throughout the ride, because he would never be in any of the scenes, because the idea was you were him. So, what ended up happening was, when they were designing the Disney World version, they sort of modified it. They modified it in ways that you would normally modify a ride you're designing like 2 decades later, but on top of that, they sort of changed the story. So they added Peter Pan to a lot of the scenes. The Disney World version added even more scenes, and they did some sort of tech upgrades. So, for instance, they used audio animatronics, which the Disneyland version did not have at the time. Luckily, the ride went over really well in Disney World, and in 1983, the Disneyland version got a major refurbishment that included a lot of the things that were in the Disney World version. So it was in a weird and pretty cool instance where, the Disney World version sort of improved onto Disneyland, and then Disneyland improved on that a little bit. So they've added audio animatronic characters to the scenes. They added more scenes. Like, one of the things Disney World has over the other parks is a lot of space. So there are bigger scenes and more scenes, and the ride was a little bit longer, clocking in around 2.5 minutes. Another thing Disney World did to improve on the ride was they use an Omni Mover style loading system. And so Omni Mover, which I've mentioned in a few episodes now, is the idea of not stopping the ride to load and unload passengers. It is a continuous chain of cars that is always moving on a slow speed. And what they do to make it easier for people to get on and off is they have sort of like a moving ground near the loading and unloading area, almost like what you sort of see at airports, or almost think of a flat escalator, something like that. So you get on and you're moving, and the car's moving, and you hop on, and then, you take off. Another very unique aspect of this ride that you don't see in other rides is that, unlike most Omni Mover rides where you're on a track on the ground, this is a ride where the car is suspended. So the track's actually above you, and you're hanging off of it, and it's sort of to create the sensation of flight. In fact, most of the scenes continue on underneath your car, so you're looking over the edge underneath you, because the idea is you're Peter Pan and you're flying, or you're with Peter Pan. And it's funny because they're using this technology that they use commonly, but they just sort of reverse it to create an opposite effect, and they do that with another effect that's very common within Disney World, which is the idea of forced perspective. So if you walk down Main Street, for instance, they use the concept of forced perspective to make buildings look taller than they really are. And that the way they do that is, as you go up in the building, each level, it gets a little bit smaller, and that way it creates this illusion for your eye that it's further away, because, things get smaller as you go further away. And so it tricks your mind into thinking that that building is taller, and that the top of that building is further away than it really is. Well, Peter Pan does the exact opposite. It uses that same effect, but rather than going up, it does that going down. So you'd be flying by the top of a building. For instance, there's a scene that flies over London when you're, first going to Neverland. And the roofs will be much larger than the bottom of the buildings, and that sort of creates this forced perspective illusion that makes it look like, you know, you're flying really high in the air, when in reality your ride car is like 17 feet above the ground. And so the ride will take you through like scenes of the movies. If you've ever seen the movie, it's very much like that. One interesting thing to note is that originally there wasn't going to be a Peter Pan ride at Walt Disney World. That spot was sort of intended to be a Mary Poppins ride, but for whatever reason, Walt Disney Imagineering sort of changed their mind and they went with Peter Pan. It's very interesting to see that they've done that in a few different cases. For instance, Pirates of the Caribbean was originally not supposed to be at Walt Disney World for reasons that they had their own reasons. They thought that ride would just sort of be redundant in an area that was so close to the actual Caribbean. But due to popular demand, they put it back in. I'm not sure if that's the same reason why they put Peter Pan in as opposed to a Mary Poppins ride, but either way, Peter Pan was the ride that ended up there, and it's still there today. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. In fact, it looks like they're going to be adding an interactive queue, which has sort of been what Disney's been doing to a lot of its classic rides in order to keep it a little fresh and in order to sort of alleviate the pain of waiting online on this long queue, because it is to this day an extremely popular ride. It's a fun little ride, and it's definitely a ride worth checking out if you're ever in Fantasyland. So that's been a quick look at Peter Pan's flight. I hope you enjoyed this video. Every week I pick a new attraction and I talk a little bit about its history and we take a look at it in Minecraft. I hope you have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, please make the most of it. And I hope to see you here next week when we take a look at another attraction from Walt Disney World. Bye, guys.